Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so luckily I'm in an audience today that I don't need to convince everyone what I normally have to do in a maths audience, that it's important to study invasive species. But first of all, I'd just like to mention this works in collaboration with my supervisor, Dr. Natalia Petrovskaya, and funding through the Forest Edge programme. And the first half or so of this talk is based on a paper we have out. I'm going to leave out a fair bit of the maths today, but if you want to see more about it, please have a look there. So what's the problem we are looking at? The main problem is to try and investigate if forest roads help to facilitate invasiveness of invasive plant species. There's been quite a lot of field data and evidence. There's a few papers here, but there's far more out in the literature that have quite differing results on how roads affect the invasiveness of plants. Some of them say that it leads to increased invasion. Some of them actually it's the opposite, or there's no effect. So there's clearly a lot more to be investigated about this, and to look into what mechanisms there are behind what's going on here. So mathematics is quite an ideal tool for this, where we can sort of have predictive modeling rather than sort of field data and collection. So we've developed a mathematical model that incorporates a road into the domain, but just some basics for the model. To start with, without a road, so we will just describe our population density within an area of invasive plants by n, and the model is going to be stage structured. So there's going to be a growth component, or so births, deaths of the species, and then there's going to be a separate dispersal component. So we're going to have non-overlapping generations for our model, and we will just describe the population density at a particular generation by nt here. So first of all, if we look at what we're actually doing for the demographic stage for births, deaths, and growth, it's just going to be a growth function. And today we're going to look at two different ones. We're going to look at Ricker growth function here. So for any population density we have, it's going to grow with this model, and depends on the choice of our parameter, we can have overcompensatory growth. So how it works is for some particular population density n we have on the x-axis, after the growth component's been applied, we reach the value on the y-axis. And then we'll also look a bit later as well for the alley growth function, and here we have the small population densities are negative growth. So this could be due to competition, say, in the landscape. If there's not sufficient density of the species, we have some negative growth. So, and then for the dispersal stage components, we just have a probability density function. So how far it spreads from its original starting point is just worked out probabilistically, and we're just going to use the normal distribution for the work. Here you can use other growth functions that account for more sort of wind dispersal and so on as well. So if we just have a look at what actually happens in the no road model, so quite a simple model, here we have the 1D slice at y equals 0. For the 2D model, just to show what's going on, we have some small initial population density. Over time, it grows and disperses. And in the no road case, it's just going to spread out nicely. So then we move on to the road model, what work's been based on. And how we incorporate the road into the model is we have some road subdomain here shown by the red line. We have some population density. It grows and spreads like normal in the no road model. We then look at that population density, what's over the road, and we have an additional dispersal component to count for extra effects of the road. Say there's decreased canopy cover, so you're going to have increased wind, you're going to have extra dispersal of, say, seeds or pollen or land on the road. You then add that component back to the rest of the population density, and at the end of the generation, you clear the road population density. Say maybe animals have come along and eaten the remaining seeds on the road, or they've died out essentially at the end of that generation. So then if we go back to our record growth function, where for any population density we have positive growth, we can look at the different cases of behavior we have in the road. And the first case of behavior here is the corridor case. So this is where it grows, disperses, it approaches the road, it interacts with the road, it crosses over the road, and will then go on in time to continue just to invade the domain in front of the road. And here we have the same growth, what's important to say, on the same dispersal, sorry, on the road as off the road for now. We'll come back to that a bit later. But actually, looking here, all maybe is the road has done is temporarily slow down the invasion of the species. We don't actually see it's increased the invasiveness of the species in this picture. We then also have a second case of behavior when the road is sufficiently wide. It actually just acts as a barrier, preventing the invasive species from invading the domain in the other side of the road as well. And we can classify that as well here for a large number of variables, what you'd be able to sort of parameterize to match for a given species. But what's important is the road width is on the y-axis, and after the road is of a sufficient width, actually we're in the barrier regime, what's the region 2 marked here. And then if we move on to our alley growth function, where for small population densities we have negative growth, or decay, and look at the behavior of what's happened, we have the same two cases we've just seen. The corridor case, where it interacts with it, goes in front of the road, but doesn't show any increase in invasion, and also the barrier case, where it prevents invasion in front of the domain. But we also now see a new regime appear in the problem, where we have what we've labeled the beachhead case, where the population density has managed to spread in front of the road, but due to these negative growths for low population densities, it actually remains stable in front of the road. It would go on and continue to invade the domain on here, the left side of the road where it was present to begin with. But actually in front of the road, it's just now this stable, small population density. It might be a bit hard to see here, so just a slightly zoomed in picture of the same thing going on. But why is this important? Well, actually, what's happening is you have this negative growth for low densities, so it decays in front of the road, but then you're adding more population in from the other side of the road again to have this equilibrium. But if you change the conditions of the invasibility of the species, if say with changing climate conditions, the invasive species suddenly performs a bit better in that area, you go from what is this stable case where it's not really causing any problems to transition into the corridor case where we go on to invade the domain in front of the road. So if say you're in region 3 here, near the boundary between the beachhead regime and the corridor regime where it invades the domain, and in the going across the x-axis to the right, we're improving the invasiveness of the species, say some climate heating improves the invasibility, we can move from this barrier case to where it goes on to invade the domain, what could cause quite a few problems. But we still haven't seen overall the roads lead to an increased invasion in the domain. If anything, we've just seen that they either act as a barrier or just temporarily slow it down. However, when we're in 2D, we said sort of before that maybe with the road, there's decreased canopy cover, animals can freely travel down the road. There's lots of evidence to suggest, for example, in certain regions, foxes or wolves or such other animals naturally travel down roads as corridors rather than just freely roaming through the forest. So maybe that actually along the road, there is an increased rate of invasion. So now here, what we've done is increased the distribution. We've increased how far it can spread just in the direction along the road and left everything else constant. And we actually see not just an increased rate of invasion along the road itself, but that also spreading out to the population density as a whole and increasing the whole population density. So here we can see actually under certain conditions for the road, it can lead to an increased rate of invasion, and other conditions as before, actually it can have the opposite effect. And what's important here as well is another thing we observe is if we have this increased rate of invasion, and we now look at the width of the road, if we just increase the width of the road, we actually reach a point, let's say in the third or fourth image here, where we have a maximal rate of invasion in the domain. So all the other parameters in the problem are fixed apart from the road width. And actually, if we increase the road width, we then have this ideal road width where invasion is at the rate of invasion is at a maximum. And if we continue to increase the road width, we actually go back down to it, eventually acting as a barrier and slowing down the rate of invasion. So when it comes to maybe designing roads, looking at different barriers and pathways, say in forests, it's important maybe to think about this, because if it's designed badly, maybe we might be in, say, this region here, where you've landed in the ideal road width for the invasive species, where the conditions help to improve invasion rather than potentially actually acting as a barrier and slow it down. And this is kind of matching as well with what I talked about at the very start with the mixed results, what appeared in some of these papers collected with field data and data in forests, where you sometimes saw roads increased invasion in the environment, and you also sometimes saw that they didn't change the rate of invasion or decreased it. So I think I've discussed most of these points here. I think some of the key ones are that with the beachhead case, we could be in the condition in some environments where the invasive species is under control, and maybe if you wanted to eradicate it, it would be fairly easy as it stands, but with increasing climate, you could get this case where it actually goes on to invade a domain where it previously did not. And also that it's still maybe a complex answer to the question, do roads increase the invasiveness of species or not? And I think it's quite important how you design roads and other paths, let's say, or other things where you break up the domain in a certain way for planning. So thank you.
Thank you, Bradley, for this very simple mathematical modeling. Now let's move to the last speaker of this session, presented by Amy Webster, a PhD student at the School of Biosciences, University of Birmingham. She will be talking about a study of disease on the island of St. Helena.
So, yeah, my name is Amy Webster. I'm a second year PhD student in the Jackson lab. And today I'm going to talk about pathogenic invasions onto remote islands. So I'm going to be talking about trees in the present day, but also thinking about the trees in the future. So St. Helena is a small island situated in the South Atlantic Ocean off the west coast of Africa. It has a population of around 4,000 people. It's got very arid land around the coast.